It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, we're looking ahead to Fulham's FA Cup fourth round match against Wigan Athletic. Is this the game where we officially go from we're in the cup to we're on a cup run? Also, we'll look back at Fulham's transfer deadline day. Not a lot to discuss. We might be signing Willian. It's not done yet. We'll get into all of that on the podcast. We'll also have a few words to say about our brilliant win up in Newcastle, I'm sure, as well. Jack Collins, hello.
Hello, Sammy. How you doing?
Yeah, all right, thank you. Although we did have some very sad news brought to us yesterday. You might remember Chris Frank from Cottage Analytic. He was on the podcast several times. He also contributed to the Fulhamish website, but he was best known for his Twitter account at Cottage Analytic. We received some awful news yesterday from his wife Jo that Chris died on January the 18th from lymphoma. Chris absolutely loved making all these brilliant stats and reports about the club. He was extremely popular, particularly on Twitter. So many of the Fulham fan base appreciated his work, as did we here on Fulhamish, and we were so blessed to have Chris contribute to the podcast. He was also part of our Fulhamish community on Telegram. I spoke to him fairly regularly as well, just generally about all things about the club. He absolutely loved Fulham and devastated to hear the news that he died back in January. He's going to be part of the celebration and memorial match against Nottingham Forest on February the 15th. And Chris's wife Jo got in touch with us just to ask if we could send the message that Chris has died because she just felt that she wasn't able to do it herself at the moment, but she just wanted to say how much he loved and appreciated the Fulham community. And all we can do is just extend our sincere condolences to Jo and her family, Chris's Fulham supporting sons, who will no doubt live the Fulham name on his name in the future. But it must be an incredibly tough time. So rest in peace, Chris, and all of our love to Jo and the family. But Chris would love us to carry on discussing Fulham because that was his favourite topic. So we will do that today. And Jack, we will start with the transfer window, transfer deadline day, February the 3rd. A lot of Fulham fans stayed up to 11 o'clock to see who would be signed, and it's nobody. Oh, don't you just love it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very quiet window. There was a continual theme of Marco Silva speaking about the fact that he wanted a right back and a right winger to come in, or a winger and a right back, shall we say. And got to deadline day, and there were the odd murmur here and there, but mostly it was crickets. And look, I have some frustrations with some of it. I know that we're slightly on different sides on various bits of this, and that's okay. But I think the frustration for me is that it was made very, very clear that Marco Silva was after certain players. Now, Kenny Tete's contract is up in the summer, and it looks like he's going to be out for the majority of the rest of the season, maybe all of it. And so I think there was maybe a sense with Fulham's kind of search for a right back, or at least a backup right back, that something could be done now to maybe preempt having to do business in the summer in that area if Kenny decides that his time with Fulham is up. Now, he might not. There might be an extension. Things might change. But right now, it looks like, and the fact that the Marco Silva was speaking in such kind of we need a right back terms, I think suggests that probably we're going to see a change of pace in that area. Obviously, Kenny Tete's contract was extended by an extra year last year. And, after he was kind of ousted from the side by Timothy Castagna, it was interesting to see him work his way back into the first team picture and then become Fulham's kind of out and out first choice right back once again. So the way that this was discussed makes me think that maybe his time here at the Cottage is coming to an end. I really hope I'm wrong on that. I really do. But the way that it's being talked about, I think, to me, suggests that something's going to change. But we didn't get a right back in. Devon Tanton came back from his loan. He was recalled from his loan spell, I think, in League One. And
League Two, Chesterfield.
League Two in Chesterfield. And I think that, we've seen in terms of the winger, there were various names thrown around loosely, I think, over the course of the window. We saw links for Jack Harrison, a deadline day link for Samuel Chukwueze, made me very excited for a very brief period of time.
That was a rumour that came from Fabrizio Romano. I mean, Fabrizio never gave it "here we go" or anything, but at one point on deadline day, that did look like it was a go. I mean, Chukwueze is a great player.
Yeah, I mean, he was excellent at Villarreal, and I wonder if it's one that Fulham go back in for at a later point, but I imagine there will be competition. He was sensational when he was in Spain, really direct, really tricky, eye for goal, the kind of player that can break things down, and I think would add, a slightly different dimension to the way that Fulham play, especially in transition. But that seemed to go cold. I think what I liked about that link was that it made sense, right? He's already struggling for minutes in this Milan side with Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musa playing on the right, with Rafa Leao playing on the left. Joao Felix comes in on loan for AC Milan on deadline day from Chelsea, and they sign Ricardo Sotil, who's a winger from Fiorentina. So the chances are that he's now sort of 7th, 8th down the pecking order. Now, there are 3 spots, so that's not quite as bad as it might sound, but it has felt like he was, a player who's being edged out. And that, for me, the reason I looked at that and thought, okay, cool, is because a deal for a player who's getting that limited kind of minutes at a big club feels like the kind of move that Fulham should be having a little peek around. Someone who's not been able to potentially fulfill their potential in Milan, but definitely still has a spark. He would have international teammates here, obviously, in the form of Calvin Bassey and Alex Iwobi, who you'd hope would be having a word if Fulham were interested. So I think it's one we might see again. I feel like he will leave Milan in the summer unless there is a real change of pace over the course of the second half of the season. But it was the kind of move that I thought, okay, yeah, that's an exciting move. And whilst the Willian thing, and we can discuss it in a minute, is fine as a short-term fix, as a patch, I think that my main issue with the way that Fulham have gone about their business in this transfer window is that Marco Silva made it very clear what he wanted. Now, I don't want the club to go out and buy, players who aren't good enough for the sake of doing so, right? I think we can all make that clear. But to then go and sign no one and be like, we'll just bring Willian back, stings to me of a lack of ambition in the transfer market. Now, obviously, at times, there is no value to be had in January. I don't think that was the case in this January transfer market. I think there was value to be had. I think you should look at some of the other deals that took place. Marcus Edwards signing on loan for Burnley with a sort of 8-10 million buy option. Seems like the kind of thing that Fulham should have been all over. Kyogo Furuhashi, you can play anywhere across the front line, left Celtic for under £10 million to join a relegation scrap in Rennes. We know for a fact that he is a player who's spoken about his desire to play in the Premier League at some point in his career. There were options in the market if you wanted to go and have a look at them in this transfer window. And I feel like Fulham have basically allowed the window to slide away without being able to address the issues that Marco Silva himself, who is, we should remember, pretty reserved when it comes to actually talking about what he needs and what he wants in the transfer market, being very, very clear of the things that he wanted to achieve in this window.
But as you say, January is not a time, and this is the point that I tried to make on X. What I said, if you didn't see it, I said that I think that Willian's fine as a short-term stopgap. And I said that January is a window for fixing problems, not really for showing ambition. And I still kind of stick by that. Fulham's first team is solid right now. Yes, there are a couple of places where there are some holes at depth. If Timothy Castagna does get injured, I don't know what we do.
Well,
I mean,
Devin
for me, it's probably, or that's someone like a Harrison Reed at right back. I mean, like, look, Bournemouth are doing absolutely fine with Lewis Cook at right back. Like, you have to adapt in these situations and it's fine. What I was struggling with is it felt like there were some people, claiming that in the January transfer market, we can go out and make the difference between kind of ninth where we are now and we can absolutely solidify Europe. And I just don't believe that to be the case. I do not believe that we could improve our squad without spending a stupid amount of money And you say Marcus Edwards. Is Marcus Edwards getting into the Fulham first team in this 4 months really making the difference? If he's only signed for Championship side Burnley, no other Premier League clubs are interested in him. Same with Furuhashi. Is there a reason why no other Premier League teams went for him in the end? And you say he went to go and join a League R relegation battle. I don't believe that either of those players would be bad backups. They'd be not bad backups to have, but that's all they are. They're not getting in the team ahead of Alex Iwobi. Okay, look, we do have a bit of a problem on the right now with Harry Wilson. Harry Wilson is injured, yes, okay, for 2 months. He's going to miss February, and there are some key games in February. There is a chance that we have one match in March, and then Harry Wilson's probably back in April. And I just think that, in previous January windows, we have made signings that have cost Fulham a lot of money because we've needed the whole bit thing of a backup. You think back to Cedric Soares. He maybe played one game at Anfield from memory. We paid him best part of $100,000 a week. You think back at Armando Broja. His only impact was to motivate Rodrigo Muniz. And as funny as it was, that it wasn't worth £4 million just to give Rodrigo Muniz a kick up the backside that he might have done anyway. It was just coincidental that it happened to be when Armando Broja joined the club. I think that in the past we have gone down this road of spending quite significant sums of cash to be backups. And I wonder if Fulham have just looked at it this time and thought, you know what? Do we need to spend a huge amount of salary on someone that within a few months is going to be a third choice right back?
Okay, and I take your point on this.
I might be wrong here, but Fulham are taking a risk.
Do you think we're paying Willian less than we'd be paying Marcus Edwards? Because I don't.
But Willian is tried and trusted.
Yeah, but also
Marcus Edwards isn't.
There is also an element of this that, towards the end of last year, I mean, look, I don't want to take away from what Willian did at points last year, right? The game at Anfield in the Cup, he was absolutely sublime. Sublime. He was brilliant. He ran that game. But I will also kind of look at it and think, okay, towards the end of the season, he started to drift off. He had 1 foot out the door and he looked like he was looking for new clubs before the season even ended. He's gone to Olympiacos. He's played 11 games, of which he started 2, right? He's had ankle injuries. He's had muscle injuries. He was dropped from the squad. And I kind of look at that and think, okay, this is an Olympiacos squad who are pretty good. They're a pretty good side and they've done well, I think, in the Europa League, considering that they came in through the Conference League route. Obviously, they won that Conference League trophy last year. So I'm not trying to take away from what that Olympiacos side is and can do, because they're a very, very decent unit. But the fact that he hasn't been able to feature almost whatsoever, I think it's less than 500 minutes in the, 4 months he was there, suggests to me that we're not probably getting a player who's going to be able to come in and make an impact straight away, as opposed to someone who, yes, maybe on the fringes of their club, but has been utilised throughout the season so far. And I think that you make a point about Harry Wilson's injury. So if he's out for February and we need someone who's going to cover the bases during February whilst he's out, and obviously Reece Nelson is potentially close to a return, but we don't know how that is, and we are not going to want to rush him back after a serious injury like that, then suddenly you're like, okay, what do you really need this player for? You need them for February. Is Willian going to be up to speed by February? I just don't see it. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see it.
But he's apparently been training with the club for 4 weeks. We're led to
why is it taking us so long to sign him?
Well, look, I mean, he trained with the club for about 6 weeks before we ended up signing him again. Look, we need a player, right? And obviously, but because Alex Iwobi is so versatile and Alex Iwobi can play on the right, bringing in Willian means that in a real pinch, you can move Alex Iwobi over to the right as well and put Willian on the left, where generally is pretty much his only position. I agree. Towards the end of last season, he was not good. That game away at Brentford was, memorably terrible from Willian. But also, that's because we were using Willian week in, week out. He was a 35-year-old. And I think if you use Willian sparingly, 20-minute cameos off the bench, playing the cup games, I think that you still got a player in there, a quality player. And as I said to you on Twitter, if you've got 15 minutes to go, it's a cup semi-final, you're at Wembley, who do I want coming off the bench? I want multi-trophy winning Willian, who is going to start doing samba tricks and keeping the ball in the corner with Tom Kearney. That's who I want, not young Marcus Edwards, who has got limited experience, just like the rest of our squad.
He's won multiple trophies as well, Marcus Edwards at Sporting. I would
Oh,
point
come
out.
on. So we're not comparing Marcus Edwards and what he's won at the top level with Willian.
I just think that, I've made a whole point for years about making this squad younger, and then we've gone and signed a man who is verging on being a pensioner. Like there is a level to this. But more than all of this, look, I think Willian will be fine. Like generally, as a player, and I said it on Twitter, same as you. I said, look, we have struggled to break down low blocks, and actually he is a player who can play that pass and can unlock a door, right? So I'm not trying to actually throw it all over Willian here. What I'm trying to get to generally, I would have preferred we had gone and signed someone younger. I would. And I think it would have been a better thing going forward. But most importantly from that, I think it shows to Marco Silva that the club are trying to strengthen the right areas. Because if I'm Marco Silva right now and Spurs come in the summer, I look at that and go, this club don't want to get to Europe.
Sorry, you actually made such an abrupt point there that I thought the screen had frozen. Maybe, but like, who? Name me other than Aston Villa, who are in the Champions League round of 16, and Manchester City, who clearly needed to invest and made major errors in the summer by not investing as much, and were making up for those errors in the summer. Who else has gone big? Have Bournemouth gone big? Have Brighton gone big?
Well, Bournemouth are about to get an absolute heap of players back from a different element, and Brighton have gone quite big. They've signed a
couple of players for the future.
From Germany, who is going to be part of that. I think you look at what Wolves have done. Yes, they're in a relegation scrap, so that
exactly
different. Crystal Palace aren't in a relegation scrap, but Crystal Palace have gone and brought in maybe one of those Championship's most exciting players in Romain Essa. Brentford went and bought one of the most exciting young right backs in Serie A, in Michael Coyote. Like, I think that there have been deals here that you look at and think, yeah, okay, that's an interesting bit of business. Yeah, Villa is a little bit of a different case. I absolutely take that. I 100% will take your point on that. But I do think that you look around and you think, okay, people haven't done loads and loads, but they've all had little moments, or most of them have had little moments. You go, oh, that's an exciting signing. That's someone that I think is particularly interesting. That's someone who's coming in here who might be able to make a difference. And I think that on the whole, and over the course of it, Fulham in a position, and this is it, right? Currently, Spurs are well below where we'd expect them to be in the Premier League table. Manchester United, well below where we expect them to be in the Premier League table. City are trundling along a little bit, so that means that they're in a lower kind of echelon, should we say, of the table than they should be. They're only a couple of points ahead of us. This is an opportunity. And look, you can say, yeah, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest are punching above their weight, which is fair and true. But also, if those two clubs then get European revenue, they're going to be able to back that up. They're going to be able to back it up by pushing onwards as well. And Brighton are probably below where we expect them to be next season as well. West Ham, to an extent. There is an opportunity here, especially with the fact that it looks like there's going to be 5 Champions League places, which means that the Conference League spot is going to drop down to at the very least 7th, but very likely 8th. There is a huge opportunity here to go and get European football again. And I feel like there was an opportunity to try and take advantage of that and make the most of it, even if that was just deepening the squad with a little bit of quality here and there in order to be able to compete across multiple fronts without looking like we're absolutely knackered all the time. And I think that we haven't gone in and been able to address that situation in the way that we could have.
I do get it. Don't get me wrong here. Like, I do think the right back and a lack of signing one is a bit odd, considering Marco pushed for it quite so hard. It's one of those that we don't know, right? We could be here in May saying, wow, didn't need the backup right back, and actually that was a masterstroke. We also could be sitting here in a week time when Timmy Castagna gets injured against Wigan, and touch wood, that does not happen, and thinking, oh crap, Harrison Reed's playing right back until Kenny Tete returns in April. We are taking a risk and we are taking a gamble. But equally, we have also taken the insurance policy in the last few years, and it always seems to be at fullback that we need an extra person every single season. And we have paid over the odds for a player who just sits around the squad. We can't get him in because we don't have enough fixtures. And all of a sudden, their third choice once a Tete returns. So I do kind of understand. I think for me, there is just an element of, with the transfer window, I get it, right? Signings are exciting, but sometimes you can be the sensible club and just go, There's no massive value here in the market, and our squad is pretty good, and our squad is pretty settled. And it's not exciting to go into transfer deadline day and make no signings. But occasionally that can be the sensible play. If you think your squad's good enough and you want to back them, and look, Fulham are not going to be playing that many games between now and the end of the season, right? We haven't got that many midweeks. Like, who knows what's going to happen in the Cup? We haven't got European football to contend with. We're out of the Carabao Cup. I just wonder if Fulham have made a calculated risk here, and Willian is just a little extra bit of ammunition that you need. And I just don't think it's the end of the world. And I really just look. Would have I enjoyed if we'd signed Samuel Chukwueze? Yes, of course, but it would have put someone's nose out of joint.
Yeah, I mean, those people are currently lying on the injury table, so there's not much you can do about them having their noses out of joint. I would just say this, that, at the time of recording, we haven't signed Willian, right? And the only two clubs in the entire Premier League who didn't sign anyone in this window were Fulham and Arsenal. Now, obviously, some of those are ones for the future. You look at, the way that Liverpool did, and it was, loans coming back in and going back out. So maybe include Liverpool in that as well. So Liverpool, Arsenal and Fulham. Two of those clubs are competing at the top of the table. And, there's frustrations, I think, especially at Arsenal, that they haven't brought in a forward. But, you kind of look at that and you think, okay, so those two clubs are the two teams at the top of the table who have decided that they don't need anything to strengthen their squads because they finished first and third in the Champions League table. The other one is Fulham. And I do just wonder if there's something in that you could probably just have a little nibble on.
Maybe, but this isn't like other clubs have signed 5 and we've signed 0. Lots of clubs have signed 1 player.
Yeah, one or
they've had a player return from loan. It's not like there has been significant movement in the market and Fulham have just been sat there going like, oh, is it the transfer window? Didn't realise. Like, I think it will all be okay. I'm a little bit worried about right back. Don't get me wrong. Like, it is concerning that we are short in that area. And, when I heard the idea of Ryan Sessegnon potentially could play at right back, I thought, bloody hell, he struggles at left back. So the idea of him playing on the wrong side does fill me a little bit with dread. But also, we've seen Marco adapt to the system as well in recent, months. And I'm sure if Castagna did get injured, I'm assuming we might see some sort of return to 3 at the back, someone at right wing back.
Well, that went well.
Probably poor old Alex Iwobi gets moved there just because he's the new Bobby Decordova-Reid. I mean, to be honest, you actually look at what Fulham need right now. How much would Bobby Decordova-Reid solve every problem in this Fulham team? That's one thing I think. I still believe that.
A 25-year-old Bobby Decordova-Reid, perhaps.
I still look. If you had Bobby Decordova-Reid, you've got every problem here is solved. You've got winger, you've got some backup up front if one of the strikers got injured. You've got a right back, you've got a right wing back. You've got everything. That was the answer, screaming us in the face. Bobby Decordova-Reid.
It did make me laugh that, earlier in the window, the first player Fulham were linked with was James McAtee. And I was like, please, for the Lord's sake, do not sign another number 10. I will absolutely lose my nuts if we go inside another number 10. Look, I've said it before, I say it again, I think we need another centre midfielder, but that might be a deal for the summer. And I will accept that might not be one for right now. But I just feel like we've let this window slide by. And there was an opportunity to go out and just, add another piece to the puzzle, someone who might be able to do something slightly different. Willian's come back. Look, I hope I'm completely wrong. I hope he shows the form that kind of scintillated us that first time round. I hope that he comes into this side and becomes a mainstay. And we're all like, oh, imagine we thought he wasn't going to be, fit enough or strong enough, or he wasn't going to play that much. I really do hope I'm wrong on this. I just don't see it from where I'm sitting right now, considering what he did in Greece.
All right. Well, we'll take a break there. Afterwards, we'll look ahead to the cup game against Wigan. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. Sammy here with Jack Collins. We'll look ahead to Wigan in a moment, but Jack, obviously it was a brilliant win on Saturday. The boys in purple doing us proud. A comeback win. Raul and Rodrigo once again recreating a striker in the aggregate and finding the back of the net to give us a win up in the northeast. I think. Well, I was going to say, no, none of us saw this coming. Me and you did say last week, and this is not we told you so kind of podcast, but we did say there would be a reaction. I didn't think we'd win, but I'm not too surprised. I guess one key thing that is starting to become quite apparent is Fulham away from home and Fulham at home. Because actually, on the road lately, we have just been pretty remarkable. Even, I know West Ham, like, we made some bad individual errors, but you actually think about the overall performance at West Ham as well. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that I think Fulham deserved something from that game and things conspired against us.
Yeah, we conspired against us.
Yeah, but at Craven Cottage, we've been pretty rubbish. Are we becoming an away team?
I think there is an element that, we talk about that transitional football, and it goes back to that whole point about teams at the top of the league and teams at the bottom of the league, right? The fact that Fulham have just managed to rack up results against teams currently in the top six, and you look at the bottom six and look at it, and it's almost embarrassing in terms of how many points we've given up. I think this kind of feeds into the same argument. And I was asked this actually on the radio yesterday by Danny Higginbottom. He said, is it to do with the idea of where, the fans and the frustration and, the lack of, I wouldn't say lack of atmosphere, that's probably the wrong word, but the kind of frustrations that are building after we saw with what happened at United and the away fans in the home ends and all of those different things. They were like, is there something to do with that? And I was like, well, maybe a little bit, but I think generally the point is actually not that. It's that we are better slightly against the ball, I think. And so teams who want to dominate the ball against us tend to bring out the best in us. And it's teams who sit in and go, yeah, you have the ball, that we tend to struggle with. And it's why I'm a little bit worried about this Nottingham Forest game at the Cottage in a couple of weeks' time. But for the time being, it's those games where Fulham are able to play slightly more transitionally, where Raul is, linking up and dropping in. I thought he was absolutely sensational at the weekend, for what it's worth. And I think that actually the way that Fulham set up and look to go at teams allows, either, it's Adama obviously at the moment or Harry Wilson to go down that right-hand side and attack teams at pace, to allow Jedi to dive forward from left back and get into dangerous positions. That's where Fulham have been at their most exhilarating this season. And I think that away from home, with a home team and a crowd who are kind of hoping that they're going to dominate the game and show that intent, allows Fulham to play in a slightly different way. I thought we were, a lot of people saying game of two halves. I thought we were okay. First half, to be perfectly honest with you, I thought we did all right. I thought we held our own. Yes, obviously there was a couple of hairy moments and, maybe the crossbar was our best player at times, but you actually do look at it and think, over the course of that 90 minutes, I thought Fulham put in a pretty, quite a cohesive display. And, when all of that is put together, I do wonder if it's to do with the fact that maybe that move to being a team that is good in transition and slightly better at, breaking down teams when the game opens up a little bit more, maybe just suits us. And that's why we've been slightly better away from home in recent weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think as well, it's a lot of these games where in the Premier League, I feel like Fulham can take advantage of not complacency from the home crowd, but let's be honest, like Fulham at home is rarely going to be the game that really gets home fans, but for us, away grounds, like super highly charged. And I just wonder if teams slightly underestimate us or fans slightly underestimate us. It felt like that a little bit at the weekend as well with Newcastle there. Did they have one eye on the Arsenal game? Yeah, I listened to them.
Reasonable, right? Like you can accept that from them, yeah. I think.
But look, fantastic win up in the northeast. This weekend we travel to the northwest to face Wigan Athletic at the Brick Community Stadium. It just rolls off the tongue. In the FA Cup fourth round to face League One Wigan Athletic. Of course, it still sounds weird to say League One Wigan Athletic.
We're going to the JJB. Let's be very clear.
Fine, JJB, DW, whatever you want to call it. We're going back to Wigan, who obviously they are prime Barclays Premiership for me, and we've had so many tussles against Wigan over the years. But League One is where they are right now, and they're fairly rooted to League One. They look very unlikely to go up this season, and at times look like they're more avoiding to go down to League Two. And look, we can be perfectly honest, Jack, that we have not seen loads of Wigan this season. So much so that we didn't realise that it's a bit of an ex-Fulham hotbed.
The old boys club, yeah. And obviously, there's going to be some interesting ones for someone like a Martial Godot who's going to want to go and perform against his old side. It has become a little bit of a lone spot or a kind of ex-Fulham spot. Brighton used to be this in like the 90s. Brighton used to take all the ex-Fulham players down with Mickey Adams. And, now we're seeing them all at Wigan. So, yeah, not only is Stevie Sessegnon there, but also Tyrese Francois. Now, neither of them have been playing in the Wigan side in recent weeks, but I wonder if they get an opportunity in this cup game, not because Wigan won't be taking it seriously, but, as you say, they are not safe, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination in League One. I imagine this is going to be low down the priority list. They're probably going to be all right. Like they're sort of 8-10 points clear, although they have played a few games more than the likes of Crawley. So it does feel like they're probably going to have one eye on just sort of trying to build through the league. And look, I've been reading a couple of Wigan blogs to try and get a gauge on how they're playing and also how the fans are feeling. And there was a league table in January of the most miserable fans in the entire EFL, and it was Wigan in 3. So, like,
can I have a guess? Do you have 2 and 1?
I don't. I'm afraid. I was just looking at this actually from a Wigan blog, but they were basically like, we can't believe we're not bottom. And I thought that was quite something, right? They've been up and down this season. They're under Sean Maloney, who's obviously he's not quite a rookie coach at this point, but someone who stepped forward when the club were in a little bit of disarray. There have been signs of life that have just failed to spark into anything particularly, long term. I quite enjoy looking at the Wigan team sheet because at the back they have James Carragher, who's Jamie Carragher's son, and on the bench they have Callum McManaman. So it basically reads like an old Liverpool team sheet from the early 2000s at this point. So that is quite enjoyable in some ways. But I think that Wigan probably have bigger fish to fry than dealing with a cup run at this point, despite the fact that obviously they have a very proud history in this competition. And I remember interviewing Ben Watson a few years back at Wembley and talking about that Wigan win over Manchester City, which has gone down in the annals of club history, as so it should, right? So I think there is probably an element of frustration with the way that this season has gone from a Wigan perspective. And I think that when you kind of look at what they've been able to do, what they've been able to put together and seeing where they are in the table, there is a fair amount of frustration. There are moments where they've looked really good, and I have seen a couple of games. I tend to keep an eye on Bolton Wanderers. But there is a sense, I think, about it that there's been a real lack of consistency over the course of this season, and that whilst there have been good performances, at times, it really hasn't translated into any sort of consistent run of results. And I think that's what's frustrating Wigan fans at the moment.
I have the table of the most miserable fans in the Football League. I'm going to give you. I've got. Do you want 4 guesses? 4 guesses for 2 spots.
Okay. Can I have the divisions?
Definitely one of them is League One. I'm sure. I don't know if the other is in League One or League Two. I think they're both in League One. They're both in League One.
Okay. I'm going to just take a quick look at the table. A team, you're kind of looking at a team who feel like they probably should be a little bit higher up the table. Maybe not quite in the. I'd say a Rotherham in there.
Bosch.
Okay.
That's number 2. They're the second most unhappy.
Reading? Surely.
No, not Reading. And also Reading are kind of like upwardly mobile a little bit. I think
from the entire club's at war with itself.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like, it's not them anyway. Not miles from Reading, if that helps you in terms of geographically.
Peterborough?
No, not Peterborough. Close in the table.
Miles from Reading. Close in the table. I mean, the next team in the table of them are Northampton Town. They're not miles away. I mean, without being funny, like, why Northampton Town fans are what? They are 20th in League One. Like, have they ever really been not 20th in League One? That's exactly where I'd expect them to be. If you gave me a league table right now of the entire EFL and went, where are Northampton supposed to be? I'd probably be like, mid-table in League One. Like, that's where I would have them pegged. What are they moaning about? Reading fans have far more to moan.
They've also got a fantastic podcast, Northampton Town. It's all cobblers to me. Beat us in the FSA podcast of the year, didn't they?
Anyway, I don't know enough about Northampton to actually tell their fans that they can't complain. So that's very unfair, and I apologise to cobblers fans.
Anyway, interesting. The only one that I know a little bit of someone who I was actually a little bit fearful of from a Wigan Town, that's definitely not their name, Northampton Town, Wigan Athletic point of view, was Thelo Asgard, the Norwegian 22-year-old who had scored 8 goals this season, but he was transferred to Blackburn?
Luton boy.
Luton, yes, he joined Luton Town, so we don't have to worry about Thelo Asgard anymore. I mean, Jack, you're heading up to the JJB, if you want to call it that, on Saturday. It's a massive away end. I don't know how many tickets we've sold, but it feels like it's going to be a fun, well-attended match.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have a good time. I'm looking forward to going back up there. I haven't been to that stadium for ages, so I'm looking forward to getting back to the ground. I always enjoy a trip up to the northwest. I have to go through Wigan Northwestern a lot on my travels to Lancaster. So, there's lots of, and the addition of knowing that we might get to see Steven Sessegnon and Tyrese Francois is all one thing. I mean, look, it's going to all be very frustrating if Fulham don't win the game, but I have relative faith that we're going to actually just get the job done here. Considering, the opposition, considering we saw off Watford quite comfortably in the round before. I don't know. And you said right at the top of the podcast, if you said you thought if we won this one, then we're officially on a cup run. I think maybe we'd have to beat someone that isn't Watford or Wigan. Maybe we could get another team beginning with W in the next round and make it the WWW. But we'll see how we go. But I'm pretty confident about it. Obviously, things can go wrong. There are banana skins in cups. We're going to have a famous cup record in some ways of being giant killers. But I think they probably have more to deal with on their plate right now than Fulham do. And I imagine that we're going to look at this and say, okay, we can put out maybe not a full strength side. I imagine he will take an opportunity, Marco, to rotate a little bit, but at least players who will have a point to prove and want to kind of go and win this game. Like, I'd be surprised if Rodrigo doesn't start. For example, maybe Martial Goddard gets a go on the left wing against the club he was on loan at. That might be something quite nice for Fulham to see and for us to see as fans. Maybe there's a couple of players, your Harrison Reeds who get a bit more of an opportunity in this game. And I think there'll be a lot of kind of fan favourites in that regard. Jorge Cuenca, you'd imagine, probably starts. Stephen Bender probably starts, for right or for ill. We'll see Ryan Sessegnon playing, which is obviously always a nice thing. I think there's probably enough to make people excited. And I do fancy our chances. And I know that comes from a place of relative ignorance in terms of, but looking at Wigan's form and looking at the way that they've gone about their business this season, I wonder if this is just a Fulham side that's too much for them.
Yeah, the difficulty is, obviously, that with a week between games, there should really be no massive need for Marco to rotate other than more just keeping people a little bit happy. I think for me, I would like to see mostly first team, just with a few of our absolutely key players given a little bit of a rest. I include Anthony Robinson in that, and I wouldn't mind Alex Iwobi having 2 weeks. Just like, I don't think he should have played in that game against Watford. He did. I do think that the left side should be given a bit of a rest. We shouldn't underestimate this. Like, I do think that I'd understand if we had a game on Tuesday, if Marco was going, right, okay, I need to rotate heavily, but we don't. We've got a week until the Nottingham Forest game. For me, it feels like a no-brainer. Also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Forest are playing on Tuesday in their FA Cup game away at Exeter. So we will have a longer break until the Forest game. Obviously, I don't think Forest will play their complete first team away at Exeter either. But we do have a neat little advantage there. So fingers crossed we can get the job done up in the Northwest on Saturday. Let's come on to some of your questions and emails. This one from Stan Symes says, "Hi Fulhamish, long-time listener, second-time emailer. I last emailed about our away shirt curse before the Spurs game in December, highlighting that it had been nearly 20 months at that point since we last won in an away/third shirt in all competitions. 2 months on from then, we have another chance at Newcastle. This is quite a mouthful, so feel free to leave it out at this time. I mentioned how this must be a record for Fulham, if not the Football League. I've looked at away results from the 2000 to 2001 season, and no surprise, it beats the previous record of the century. Before this, between Newcastle and Reading, 19 months. This also makes 2007 and 2024 2 full calendar years where the away and third shirts didn't see any glory. In fact, 2007 Shrewsbury in the League Cup was our only away win. You might notice the red and black ended our third curse. The copy of this shirt we currently have may have the power to do the same. As you say, he sent this before the Newcastle game.
It did do the same, but it wasn't the red and black.
It was the purple. So the away shirt curse is over. And Stan is probably right. We probably will be wearing the away kit at Wigan. So yes, I think, is that curse over, Jack, or now is it an away shirt curse because the third shirt did the job against Newcastle?
Or maybe the away shirt can do the job against Wigan. Let's hope for the best. I imagine they will be in the red and black. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, let's hope for back-to-back wins in away/third kits. That'll be quite something. But thank you for the research, Stan. It's quite something.
Incredible research. Sorry, I slightly butchered the email there, but yeah, it's great. This one from John Marmora. Hi team, some thoughts below I figured I'd share. Hope you guys are well and enjoying a good start to the year. Listening to all the sentiments shared lately, I can't help but feel I'm taking crazy pills right now. Why all the grumpiness around the fan base? I understand one could make the argument that this season has been somewhat frustrating given up and down performances and results that perhaps seem to be one step forward and 2 steps back. But let's not forget all the agony we went through from 2014 to 2022 when each year was spent either A, stressfully fighting relegation, B, stressfully chasing a promotion, or C, toiling away in the irrelevance of the bottom of the championship, feeling sorry for ourselves, and D, rubbing our legs with cheese from Tesco or some combination of all the above. Each of those years, we all longed for the stress-free seasons of mid-table Premier League mediocrity. While I'm by no means calling us mediocre, because this is one of the best Fulham sides in recent memory, my only point is why can't we just stop and enjoy where we are right now and how far we've come? Am I wrong to disagree with everyone's calls to push for Europe? Would it not be more advantageous to focus on establishing ourselves as a steady Premier League mainstay? And by mainstay, I mean well beyond just 2 or 3 seasons before we push for Europe. I just think it's a touch over-eager and naive to expect us to be ready for that at this juncture. Anyway, I'll stop there as I've rambled. Just don't want everyone to lose sight of the bigger picture. And that's best from John.
Yeah, I mean, I think John probably has a point. I mean, look, I am a perennial football fan in that I'm constantly chasing the end of the rainbow and looking for that leprechaun gold, right? Like, as soon as you get to one place, you're excited about what the next thing is. And we can be guilty of over-egging that too much. I do think that John might have a point in terms of, can you set yourself a base and then move on? The problem with that, I think, is that if you don't try to kick on when the opportunities are there, you risk losing the people who took you to this point, right? And you're putting your faith in Fulham turning over players who are going to have the same quality over and over and over again. You put your faith in Fulham turning over a manager who is going to have the same quality as Marco Silva. And I think that whilst it makes sense to some degree to be like, cool, let's build a platform, let's not push for Europe, let's leave it. And I do take that point. I just do think if you show a lack of, ambition to kind of get there in some ways, you probably risk, the next time a big Saudi offer for Marco Silva comes in, is he going to be like, you know what, it's going to be an easy life. And I wonder if you have to keep trying to stretch the boundaries and push the envelope in order to actually keep the ambitions of your players, your staff satisfied. And that involves continue trying to push to the next level. Like the first season back up was all about survival, achieved. The second season back up was about solidifying in the mid-table pack, achieved. The third season, and look, I don't mind in some ways if we don't get to Europe, right? But I want Fulham to push for it. And I want Fulham to be able to be there and at the end of the season have something to play for. I don't want to be in the beach in March again. Like it gets to that point of a season. And whilst there is obviously something in enjoying the calm and enjoying the kind of fuss-free, we can go to a game like the United game, right? And where Fulham probably slightly the better team. You know, as you say, the West Ham game where Fulham were probably the better team, but shot ourselves in the foot. And those frustrations still exist. You can come out of those games frustrated, and trust me, I did. But you come out of those games frustrated, and the next day you're like, well, probably not going to relegate us, right? And there is obviously a level of calm and a level of kind of, it's going to be all right, that comes with that. And I think it's important. But I do think that if you don't show ambition to try and push on, also, I will say this, standing still is going backwards in the Premier League. You know, obviously we're seeing teams come up and struggle to actually make the jump and whatever. And, you know, maybe we see another 3 teams go down this season who got promoted. And if that happens, I think the gap is going to keep getting bigger because teams have that Premier League money to reinvest over and over and over again. And that makes it very difficult for teams to come up and compete. But I do think if you don't push forwards, people are going to get frustrated with where the side are and where they're going. And I don't think we want that with such a good team. You know, as John points out, one of the best he's seen in recent memory. You know, I would like to be pushing for things so that we can keep that team together and we can continue to build on it, not have to continually rebuild every summer as players or managers head off for a project that's more ambitious.
Next email from Andrew Stanley. Now, it's a really long one, so I'm going to try and paraphrase. But I think it's interesting because it's around Scott Parker. And there was a piece on the Fulhamish website. It was by Ben Ballard about Scott Parker, and it was quite negative, quite critical of Scott. And so Andrew has written a long letter here, effectively to paraphrase that. Do we forget some of the good that Scott Parker did? You know, he mentions in here, which I actually do see as a bit of a point, that did he pave the way, for instance, for Marco Silva to have the control at Fulham that he did? He also wonders if we've got slightly blinkered memories of Scott Parker. The fact that Fulham, in his words, we all said that Fulham were playing like Barcelona at some points during that 1920 season. And he's not wrong. There were some incredible performances during that 1920 season. He also picks apart Ben's kind of criticism of Parker at Bournemouth, but Parker at Bournemouth finished 2 points behind Fulham. And, you know, he did speak out about not signing players. Lo and behold, they bring in Gary O'Neill, they bring in Antonio Raiola, they signed lots of players. Parker wasn't necessarily hugely wrong with his criticisms about Bournemouth. Now,
you throw all of those players under the bus, and then Gary O'Neill came in and was like, this team is absolutely fine.
Yeah, I just... It's interesting, but what I kind of wanted to come on to, Jack, using Andrew's letter as a jumping off point, is it's weirdly impressive what he's doing at Burnley. Yeah. The amount, 9 consecutive clean sheets is absolutely ludicrous. I think that they've kept clean sheets in 22 of 31 games. They obviously can't score either, really. Obviously, they've had a few games.
Did you see this yesterday where when they scored, the entire Burnley away end erupted in a chant of "We've scored a goal," which probably sums it up, right? Yes, we know Scott Parker can coach the defence, especially in the Championship. You know, we saw that. We saw that Fulham team, which was stacked with Championship attacking talent, right? Like absolutely stacked. We saw that team get to, you know, and grind out results by putting in an incredible rearguard action. We saw Scott Parker do that to an extent in the Premier League. It wasn't the amount of goals that Fulham conceded that saw us relegated. It was the lack of being able to score. And I think that, look, Scott Parker is clearly evolving as a coach, right? And I think to suggest that he is as one-dimensional as he was in his rookie season at Fulham is probably unfair. And I think that, you know, you can level whatever criticism you like at Scott Parker about the manner of his leaving, the manner of his departure, the way that he played football, the utilization of certain players in the Premier League, Alexander Mitrovic, and the fact that that squad that Fulham had there had Ademola Lookman in it, who has just won African Player of the Year, had Anguissa in it, who's in the Serie A team of the season at the moment, who's been absolutely brilliant, had a prime Joachim Andersen in it, had Tosin, who was the bedrock of a defence that kept Fulham in the Premier League for 2 years. There was a lot in that team that you look at and think that was a good enough team to survive, right? A good enough team under the right manager that would have survived. So I think you can level all those criticisms, but to suggest that Scott Parker is now the same manager, yes, there are still similar traits in terms of the way that he is a defensive first coach, and there will be Burnley fans frustrated about the fact that they don't attack with any pace and that they tend to be winning games 1-0 rather than 5-0, especially considering the team that they have got there and some of the players and what the football that they watched under Company with a similar squad 2 years ago, right, in the Championship where they blew teams away. But to suggest that Scott Parker hasn't evolved as a coach and learned a little bit over, his various, I think, failings is a reasonable word to use here. The Club Brugge job, undoubtedly a failing. The Bournemouth exit and then seeing that team go on and succeed, probably you'd consider a failing. I think that Fulham team in the Premier League, you'd consider a failing. But you learn from those things, right? That's what shapes young managers. And I think that for all the criticisms you can level at Scott Parker, one of the things you can't level at him is that he doesn't want to make it work and he's not willing to put the yards in to actually succeed. Now, his style of football might not be for me. It might not be for you. It might not be for a variety of people. But ultimately, we've seen that it's been successful in the Championship twice in terms of getting teams promoted. It looks like it's on course to get a third team promoted in the shape of Burnley. And we will see next year, if they do come up, what the litmus test is has he learned his lessons from the Premier League experiences? But I don't think it's fair to level any criticism to say that he's exactly the same manager as he was back then, even if there is a similar level of, onus on getting the defence right first and then working the rest out later.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was, I just, as much as being a Burnley fan watching that week on week must be quite mind numbing, that achievement of 9 clean sheets in a row, it's almost like he's like cracked it. It's like some sort of cheat code and if they can come up to the Premier League, and I think this is where I sincerely doubt it will be possible, but if they can come up to the Premier League and have a solid defence, nick games, then that would be an incredible achievement.
In the Premier League, this is what he tried to do with Fulham, and look, our defensive record that year was fine, right? Like he worked it out, but it was the problem that you tend to get the bigger, the better teams, and most teams are better than you when you come up. They tend to be able to nick a goal, so the chance, those games, those draws didn't turn into wins. And that was that segment in the middle of the season where Fulham drew so much that didn't help us kind of dig our way out. And I wonder if there is just an element of that as well. But, maybe he has learned his lessons. And it's going to be interesting to see how he develops as a coach from here on in.
Finally, Jack, it is the Super Bowl on Sunday.
Yeah.
Eagles versus the Chiefs. And therefore, I thought that we would go back to a topic that we brought up a few weeks ago, which was an American team for me in any sport, to be honest. But I just thought that it was a nice juncture into that. We had a few emails at the time that we didn't take advantage of. Obviously, you were trying to get me to turn into a what fan?
Can't remember. I'm Mets, Jets, and Celtics.
I think it was Mets.
Don't be a Jets fan. Be a Mets. Yeah, don't be a Jets fan. I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
Yeah, I think you were trying to turn me into a Mets fan. Anyway, this one from Steve Marshall suggesting a baseball team. He said, one thing that Jack didn't mention about the Mets is that they have just signed Juan Soto to a $500 million contract. The equivalent would be like Fulham bringing in Jude Bellingham for $150 million. We'd love to have a player of that caliber, of course, but it's also impossible and shows that the clubs are not exactly an apples to apples comparison. So I'd be remiss not to mention the team I've rooted for since birth, the Chicago White Sox. They're coming off a season with the most losses of any baseball team since 1899, but hear me out. They've played in the same neighborhood for their entire 125-year existence, and they're in the shadow of a much more popular neighbor. The Cubs sound familiar. So he's suggesting that I support the Chicago White Sox. I think it's a decent point. Matt Haman is suggesting that I should support the Detroit Lions in American football. This is a team that's always been the underdog.
Can't join them now. They're in the middle of a winning streak.
Well, surely they're not. Surely they've lost, considering they're not in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, they've lost it. They lost a kind of shock result in recent weeks. But like joining the Lions now is like jumping on City after they've been, they've suddenly started, getting towards the top of the table. Like the Lions are like, I have a lot of friends who are Lions fans, and they have suffered for so many years. But the last 2 years have been incredibly enjoyable from their perspective, even if they haven't got to the game that they expected to this season. But, jumping on the Lions bandwagon now that doesn't feel right.
Well, Matt has promised a hat if I decide to support the Detroit Lions. So that is a real big incentive for me. I think a bit of bribery.
Sam Tighe is it, and Dean Jones, both huge Lions fans.
Then Anthony Fernandez said, hi Fulhamish, long-time listener, occasional DM slider. I'm writing to express my sincere disappointment at Jack's choice of the Mets. I had hoped I was going to be joined in my lonely Fulham Jets Yankees fandom, but alas. I would say it's nice to balance Fulham and the Jets with a consistently successful team, but it's not quite worked out that way in the last decade. If you're choosing a baseball team, please don't pick the Astros or Dodgers. For your sanity, I'd avoid either Chicago team or the Athletics. He's actually not suggested which team I support. Maybe he's trying to suggest I should go and support the Yankees, which doesn't feel very Fulham. But he's just warning me off several different teams there. So I don't know. I feel like the hat might sway me.
The hat might say. I mean, look, these are different sports, so you could actually obviously pick a couple, like the Lions play NFL and the Cubs and the Yankees. I've been to Wrigley Field to watch the Cubs actually, and I have been past the White Sox ground as well. But Wrigley Field was like a very, very special experience. That was very cool. Like the old school nature of that is a little bit Craven Cottage in some ways, even if the Cubs aren't really a direct comparison. But Wrigley Field is an amazing, amazing place.
Finally, TJ Fogarty, our friend who runs the Philly Fulham Supporters Club, he just said, P.S. enough of this anti-Philadelphia sports team nonsense. Sammy and George have been to Lincoln Financial Field and done a podcast in Philadelphia. Now is a great time to hop on the Eagles bandwagon. For you, TJ, go Eagles on Sunday. Surely we're back in the Eagles here, Jack. We can't have Chiefs winning it again.
No, I'm all for the. I don't know if it's an underdog tale. It's probably not, but you know what I mean. Like, as in, much as history is cool, you can't. Three-peats are boring. Let's go Birds.
Yeah, I also, we had a great time in Philly, and there is a great Philadelphia Fulham Supporters Club.
I feel maybe at the moment a little bit because the Union are in a bit of a mess, and they've obviously just sold Jack McLean. So the Union are not quite where they want to be. So the Eagles are holding it down for Philly at the moment.
All right. Well, go Eagles on Sunday for all of the Philadelphia Fulham supporters. I mean, also, there might be a Fulham Kansas supporters club.
Hope you have a good time too, where you don't win.
Good luck to both teams.
We'll support the referee. We're supporting Kendrick Lamar.
I support the halftime show. Right. Anyway, that'll do for the podcast today. The main thing is that hopefully Fulham get a win on Saturday in the FA Cup. Jack, safe trip up to Wigan.
Thank you very much, Sammy. I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing how we get on against Fulham B.
And have a great weekend, whatever you're up to. We will be back Sunday, Monday at some point, reviewing everything that happens up at the JJB. Until then, come on, you Whites.
You Whites.